Hi, good morning, grade 12. This is the last lesson for chapter 5. And then, as I said yesterday, after we are finished with chapter 5, we're going to spend some time just to catch up on the doing of the activities and then the marking of these activities. In your textbook, today we are on page 110, okay, page 110. All right, now a large piece of today's work, I'm actually going to tell you to scratch out. It is in your exam guideline, okay? Literally, there is a question that says evaluate South Africa's trade policies, okay? But what is in your textbook is what is in the approved textbooks. It is a lot of history, okay? All this history is really, really unnecessary. At most, you can read through this, okay, but you are definitely not going to study it. If they ask, like they often do as an additional part to an essay question, that you need to evaluate how successful export promotion or import promotion or protectionism or free trade or whatever it is, you are going to refer to current things. So nothing in this section here is current. It is all about history. All right, so you are literally going to scratch out with me now, okay? This whole section that says evaluate South Africa's trade policy, you can read through this. Now, I'm not going to waste time teaching this because it's a whole bunch of history. You can literally read through this, but as I said, none of this you're going to study. Okay? At most, you're going to read through. Okay, also this section where they talk about import substitution and export promotion, right? Also this is all history. It gives background. There's nothing there that we haven't spoken about, okay? Like, for example, why was import substitution popular? Why did we use it? We know this because we taught this under import substitution. All right. So South Africa's import substitution policy, all of this is history. We are not going to study this. At most, you read through this. Okay, so export ready, we're scratching it out. Okay, read through it at best. Then same thing for export promotion. Okay, it's still evaluating. Now, how did South Africa do export promotion in the early 1970s? Who cares? None of us was even there. Right, scratch out, scratch out. The early 80s, you were not even a twinkle in your parents' eyes. 85, scratch out. We know, don't care about that stuff anymore. Okay, the 1990s, you can also scratch out. The 1990s is long ago. Right, up to here. Okay, up to here, this is where you scratch, and at most you read through. But as I said, if they ask you to evaluate the success of policies, they are going to expect you to say, okay, it's successful or it's not successful, and you're going to have to give reasons for that, but you're going to have to refer to current events. All right, I will talk to you about that just before we write finals, whenever that's now going to happen. Right, so where I'm going to start teaching today is where it says protection and free trade. Okay, the section where it says protection and free trade, I'm going to give you the page number now. Everything up to here we have scratched. Okay, so on page 112, that is where the actual teaching starts today. All right, so the only thing that we're going to look at today basically is the different trade protocols that South Africa is a part of. All right, and these you need to know. Okay, they do ask these 8-mark discuss questions. They can use it in data response questions, not essay questions, obviously, but this is important. Okay, you need to know what the abbreviation stands for. You need to know who the member countries are. You need to know if it's a free trade area or if it's a common market or if it's a monetary union, that kind of stuff you need to know. Okay, so these things are important. It's not easy to study. This is like khaki work to study, but unfortunately you have to. Okay, so the first trade protocol we're looking at is the Southern African Customs Union, SACU. The current members is Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, South Africa, and Swaziland. You'll see all of these countries are in Southern Africa. Okay, and in terms of a new agreement now, South Africa and the other members of SACU jointly negotiate free trade areas with the rest of the world. Okay, now SACU's Customs Union. Remember, Customs Union means that it is step 2. All right, remember first step 1 is a free trade area. Step 2 is a customs union. So this means that between Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, South Africa, and Swaziland as member countries, There will be the freedom of goods and services. Goods and services will flow freely between these member countries without any kind of restriction. Plus, all of these member countries will have similar restrictions on trade with non-members. So if any of these countries, these member countries, wishes to trade with America, for example, whatever this union, the SACU, decides the protectionist measures needs to be, if they decide on a customs duty, that customs duty must be applied by all of these member countries. What this last point means is that as a customs union, the member countries are also busy negotiating free trade areas with other countries. All right, so they have, as a union, they have engaged also in other trade protocols with other countries. The second trade protocol we're going to look at is called the Multilateral Monetary Area, or the MMA. Okay, now just to give you the history behind this, from 1910, there was a monetary union, some kind of a monetary union between South Africa, Botswana, Lesotho, and Swaziland, where all of these countries used the same currency back then. Then in 1974, Botswana withdrew from the agreement when they introduced their own currency, which is the pula, which is the one that they are using. All right, then there was an official monetary agreement that was established between the remainder of the countries, which was then Lesotho, South Africa, and Swaziland. That was called the Rand Monetary Area Agreement, or the RMA. All right, in which that case, the currency that was used commonly between these countries was the Rand. In 1986, they just changed the name, okay, from the RMA into the CMA, which was the Common Monetary Area. And then after that, the CMA was replaced by the MMA when Namibia also joined the monetary union. Now, very important, it is not that these countries only use Rand. All of these countries do have their own currencies. In Lesotho, it's Maloti, the Langeni in Swaziland, and the Namibian dollar in Namibia. But in all of these countries, Rand is still accepted as a means of payment and is legal tender. So if we, for example, go on holiday to Namibia or Lesotho or Swaziland, we can use our Rand when we go there. And the last sentence there, parity is maintained between these currencies. So basically what that means is if we cross over into Namibia, 1 Rand equals 1 Namibian dollar. Okay, that's basically what that means. So if we go and travel, if we go to Lesotho right now to go and see the snow, that's why it's so cold here, then we can use our Rands when we buy stuff, when we go to Lesotho. All right. Their currencies is not acceptable here. The Rand is accepted as legal tender, both in South Africa and then all the other member countries of the MMA. The next trade protocol is the SADC, Southern African Development Community. We became a member in 1992. It has 14 member states. You see the list there. Angola, Lesotho, Mauritius, Swaziland, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Mozambique, Namibia, Tanzania, South Africa, the DRC, Malawi, the Seychelles, and Zambia. All right. Now, the intention is eventually to develop the SADC into an economic and monetary union, but presently we only have a free trade area. So presently, on paper, goods and services can move without restriction between these member countries. Okay, now according to the agreement that we have reached, there's 97% of goods and services imported from other SADC countries that qualify for duty-free access into South Africa. So 97% of the goods and services that we import from the other member countries of the SADC comes into South Africa, and we do not place restrictions. There's no customs duties or quotas or anything that is applicable. And then by 2012, 99% of goods and services when trading intra-SADC, means trade between themselves, were duty-free. All right, so it's a free trade area. It's only at step 1. Okay. If we look at the African Union, we did do this one in detail also last year. Okay, the whole idea behind the African Union is, again, the intention to develop the whole continent, the whole African continent, into an economic and monetary union, so the last step, which would mean that we would have one government, one central bank, one monetary policy. Okay. Now, the African Union adopted NAPAD. You will hear about NAPAD often, okay, as a development strategy. All right. NAPAD stands for New Economic Plan for Africa's Development or something like that, okay? But it provides for regional cooperation and integration. And basically what the first step entails is that the whole of Africa is divided into 5 regional free trade areas, of which the SADC is one. So different, because Africa is obviously huge. So in Southern Africa, we have our free trade area of the SADC. They have one also for Central Africa, Northern Africa, Eastern Africa. So, there's 5 different ones at this stage that is functioning as free trade areas. And then the idea is to move from these separate 5 free trade areas eventually into an economic or monetary union. We did discuss last year there were certain deadlines set for certain things to be happening. Obviously, we are light years behind the schedule of what they actually want to happen. Okay, so it's not going to happen anytime soon. The European Union, this is something that we are not a member of. No, we are not a member of the European Union, but we have a trade agreement with the European Union. Okay, so our free trade agreement with them means that 95% of the stuff that we send to them, the stuff that we are exporting to them, it's imports for them, it's exports for us. So 95% of the goods and services that we export to the European Union is according to free tariffs, no tariffs, no customs duties, no restriction, freedom of movement for those goods. That is from 2010. We've had this agreement since 2010. On the other hand, obviously they give us something, we have to give them something. So we have offered them 86% free tariffs on imports from them. All right, so 86% of the stuff that we import from the European Union comes into South Africa without restriction, but it is phased in over a 12-year period. Starting in 2010, so only in 2022, basically, will all of those 86% of goods and services be free of tariffs. Okay, so tariffs are being scaled down in sectors like clothing and textiles, footwear, automotive products. They will not be eliminated altogether. There are certain of our industries in our country that still has protection. All right, because obviously it's going to cause huge job losses if we don't protect them. Then we also have MERCOSUR. We did refer to MERCOSUR also yesterday. Again, South Africa is not a member of MERCOSUR, okay? MERCOSUR is a customs union between Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, but we have a fixed preference agreement in SACU. Remember, South Africa is a member of SACU. Between SACU and MERCOSUR, there is a preference agreement, a free trade agreement that covers 150 different agricultural products. So the whole aim here is to strengthen existing relations between the parties, and that we need to promote free trade so that eventually we will have a free trade area. It is not even a free trade area yet, okay? Just a preferential agreement. We have an agreement that 150 agricultural products that we give preference to them. Then the Japan-SA Partnership Forum, okay, that provides bilateral relations in trade and investments. Okay, bilateral means that there's 2 countries that is involved. So this is a protocol where it's literally just between us and Japan. Okay, so South Africa as a country, not part of SACU, right? So Japan in 2011 was South Africa's 4th biggest trading partner. All right, I'm just going to quickly Google for you to see where we are now. All right, obviously as one of our main trading partners, we trade with Japan obviously a lot. Okay, at the moment, largest trading partners. Okay, at the moment, 1, 2, 3, they're not even top 5 anymore. Okay, at the moment, our top trading partners is China and Germany second, then United States, then United Kingdom, and then India. Okay, obviously, China and India is also members of BRICS with us. Okay, but we still do trade with Japan quite a bit, all right? So we've got different protocols, different agreements. You'll see there in terms of science and technology, culture and arts, international issues or whatever, but we do have trade agreements with Japan as well. The one that is very important to us now and into the future is BRICS, the BRICS protocol. All right, South Africa joined as member of BRICS in 2011. Okay, so with this now, I joined 4 of the 7 biggest economies in the world. All of these countries, it's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and then South Africa. All of them are emerging economies. So with the exception of South Africa, it is countries that had relatively high economic growth rates. The rates of development is very quickly. Obviously, this was before coronavirus. We'll have to see what this does now to the economic growth rates of these countries. Okay, but as a member of BRICS, obviously we enjoy trade and investment benefits and influence on world forums. Now we have joined some of the most influential countries in the world. All right, China is said to be one of the economies to watch. A lot of people are of the opinion that China will overtake America as the leading economy in the world. And the way the coronavirus is going, this is actually quite a reasonable kind of assumption. All right. The group also proposed the establishment of a BRICS development bank, okay, but the bank is not in South Africa. All right, the bank is in, I think, Shanghai. So it will be funded and managed by BRICS and other developing countries, and it serves as an alternative to the IMF for member countries to pool their resources and to obtain loans. Now, if you listened to Mr. Ramaphosa's speech last week, Thursday, he did indicate that in order to finance this 500 billion rand injection that the government is wishing to put into the economy, they are going to borrow more money from the IMF. We know we have drawing rights at the IMF, but he also did mention that we are going to take out a loan from the BRICS Development Bank. Okay, now we can only do that because we are a member of BRICS. All right, obviously it is a loan and it is something that has to be paid back, but it does give us an alternative to the IMF. It does give our government a source of extra revenue. Mostly it is supposed to be used for infrastructure development. Obviously in this stage now, I would say in South Africa, it's crisis times, state of disaster at the moment, difficult financial times ahead. The government has to take steps to stimulate the economy, to save people's livelihoods. So they are going to borrow from the BRICS Development Bank in order to push some money into our economy. At this stage, it is helping us. In the future, we're going to cry because we're going to have to pay it back. Right, then just quickly, AGOA. Okay, that is the African Growth and Opportunity Act. That is an initiative started by America that was signed in May in the year 2000. The purpose of this legislation is to help the economies of African countries and to try and improve the relations between African countries and America. Obviously, with Trump's reign, this relationship between Africa and the USA is more a bit strained, okay? But the whole idea behind this agreement is that it provides duty-free entry of certain goods coming from African countries into America. So in other words, we are allowed to export certain goods and services from Africa to America without restriction. Okay, so they will not levy any customs duties or discourage people from buying the stuff that we actually export there. So it does help us. Okay, American imports under this agreement are becoming more diversified because the stuff that we are buying from America or Africa is buying from America is becoming more diversified. So there's more and more things that we are importing from them, but petroleum products must continue for the largest portion. Okay, 91% of imports from America into Africa is petroleum products. Now remember, America's got oil, we don't. All right, chemical and related products increased by 39%. Okay, so chemical products, there's a big increase. And, this is wrong there. South Africa's largest trading partner is America. Okay, I want you actually to take out the sentence. Now I'm going to just cross it out because obviously at the time when this book was written, it was true. It is no longer true. Remember, our largest trading partner is now China. All right, but I think instead of crossing it out, let's not cross it out. Let's do this. Okay, it is not our largest trading partner. It is our what was it, second largest trading partner. I'm going to quickly just confirm before we make a mistake. Third largest. Okay, so in your book, you need to fix this now. As you listen to this lesson, you need to fix it, because otherwise you're going to forget, and then you're going to make a mistake in the exam, and you're going to tell me, but ma'am, this is what the textbook says. I'm going to say, yes, Pity, because you didn't change it when you were supposed to change it. Change it now so that you don't forget about it. Remember, America is our third largest trading partner currently as we speak. Okay, also before Corona, we'll see how that changes. Right, then just in general, when we look at South Africa's international trade, we almost trade equally between Eastern countries and Western trading blocs, and all countries are obviously going to become very important. As free trade is increasing, we are constantly in conversation with governments of other countries trying to sign new protocols, okay, to negotiate the best deals for our country, to see how our country can actually benefit from free trade. Right, that's the different trade protocols. The next thing we're looking at today is just trade liberalisation. Trade liberalisation means to make trade more free. Okay, the process of moving towards free trade. This first definition here, this is your definition. That one that I've highlighted just now. Okay, it is the removal or the reduction of trade practices that prevent the free flow of goods and services between countries. So the process of reducing any restrictions that we have on trade, when we start reducing those tariffs and those quotas, that is trade liberalisation. We are freeing up trade. Right, so it includes the dismantling of tariffs. Okay, so we're decreasing customs duties and export subsidies, non-tariff barriers like import licenses, import quotas, random standards, quality standards that we use as a reason to not trade with other countries. Any of those forms of protection that we looked at in the import substitution lesson, all of those we are supposed to start dismantling slowly. Nobody said that we must just abolish them all of a sudden. It is a process. We're slowly but surely reducing our customs duties, slowly but surely eliminating the quotas, etc., etc. Okay, now the World Trade Organization, who is heading this trade liberalization process, they have two operating principles that countries are supposed to stick to when we liberalize our trade. Okay, the first one is reciprocity. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Don't crucify me. And then most favored nation. Okay, the first one, it means that when there's an arrangement between two countries where each country can buy from and sell to the other country, they exchange equal privileges. Okay, so it means that if I offer a certain privilege to America, America is supposed to show us the same privilege. If we give them a concession, they give us the same concession. All right, so what we do to them, they do to us. If we give them an advantage, they need to obviously give us an advantage as well. Now, sometimes, as you've seen, we've just been through the trade protocols. Sometimes these trade protocols, because South Africa is a developing country, if we have trade protocols with developed countries, sometimes they offer us some advantage, and we offer them an advantage, but not to the same extent. Okay, so when developed nations accept less than full reciprocity, when they give us 100% customs duty free trade area, and we only give them like 80%, that is called relative reciprocity. Okay, so it's not full, we're not, whatever they give, we don't give them back, but we give something back. Okay, they give us 100% tariff free, we give them 80% tariff free. Okay, we are giving them something back, we are giving them some advantage, not an equal advantage, but we are giving them something back. The second policy is most favored nation, or MFN. This means that there should not be any discrimination between World Trade Organization members. All right, so for example, if Mexico decides to reduce its tariffs on shoes from China, okay, so when China exports shoes to Mexico, Mexico will not put a customs duty on those Chinese shoes. Then it must apply the same lower tariff to shoes from all World Trade Organization members. So if there's another country that is also exporting shoes to Mexico, Mexico should also reduce the tariffs for that country. All right. obviously this means that smaller countries can also be protected. Countries can't discriminate against other countries for whatever reason. An advantage that you offer to one member country must be offered to other member countries as well. Okay, now when countries do this, when countries apply these principles, it means then that member countries do not discriminate against each other. Any concession that we grant to one country, any advantage that is given to one country is given to all member countries of that protocol. Member countries can then not increase tariffs without negotiation. So once you have established a trade agreement, you cannot renege on that agreement and just say, no, I'm not sticking. I said no tariffs, but now I'm going to put a 10% tariffs. Or I'm going to increase my tariffs with 5% or whatever. It cannot be done if an agreement has been reached. If you breach that arrangement, okay, the World Trade Organization, we're going to talk about that now, they are the kind of judge and jury on the system. All right, but if you have an agreement, you need to stick to this agreement. Member countries cannot just increase tariffs without negotiation. And then, as I said, World Trade Organization can take action against countries that make use of dumping. Remember, even if we do free trade, if one country dumps in another country, we are totally allowed to use customs duties or whatever restrictions in order to protect our local industries against dumping. Dumping is an unfair trade mechanism. Okay, it is not done in good faith. All right, so World Trade Organization, as the judge and jury, can take action against those countries that dump or make use of unfair trade barriers. The World Trade Organization will decide what is allowed and what is not allowed, what is fair and what is not fair. Okay, then trade restrictions between members in a free trade area may be abolished, but maintained with the rest of the world. Obviously, if you are part of a free trade area, it means that with member countries in this free trade area, goods and services can move freely. But it doesn't mean that goods and services are going to flow freely between other countries that is not members of this free trade union. That is what this point means. If you establish a free trade area, goods and services flow freely between the member countries, but obviously not necessarily with the rest of the world. And as I mentioned earlier, once we do trade liberalization, the lower tariffs is phased in over time. We don't want to cripple an industry. We don't want to destroy any country's economy. Any sudden changes is going to do just that. So the idea is that we phase them in slowly over time. The last thing that we are going to look at is just the World Trade Organization. They haven't asked this in a while, but it is an 8-mark discuss question. In the past, they have asked 8-mark discuss questions where you need to describe the role of the World Trade Organization in trade liberalization or in free trade. Okay, now this whole free trade movement started after the Second World War. Okay, obviously there was a need between countries to reduce trade restrictions so that more countries could benefit from trade. Obviously, the Second World War destroyed a lot of countries' economies, so we needed to resurrect some of the leading economies in the world. So in 1947, there was about 23 countries that signed the GATT. Okay, that stands for the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. The GATT was the very, very first indication of trade liberalization. But then from 1995, the GATT was replaced by the World Trade Organization. So very often they ask you who was the forerunner of the World Trade Organization. You need to know that was the GATT. Now, the most important functions of the World Trade Organization, first of all, is the administration and implementation of multilateral trade agreements. Okay, so they will administer, they will be the kind of middleman when countries are busy in negotiations with regard to trade agreements. The World Trade Organization will make sure that those agreements, once the agreements have been reached, that they are implemented and administered correctly. It also acts as a forum for multilateral trade negotiations. So if there's a dispute between different countries, obviously the World Trade Organization, as I mentioned earlier, will be the judge and the jury. They will decide what is fair, what is not fair, what is the right thing to do, what does this agreement actually mean. Okay. Also the supervision and the review of national trade policies. Remember, all countries have their own international trade policy. Our international trade policy is a combination of export promotion and import substitution. So when countries make changes to the international trade policies, the World Trade Organization will review those policies to see if it is in line with their rules regarding international trade. For example, we can't just randomly introduce new customs duties. We are supposed to liberate trade. The World Trade Organization will then tell that country, no, your international trade policy, you cannot implement a new customs duty, please change it. Yeah, they supervise how we change it and how we implement it. So the whole idea, the overall aim of the World Trade Organization is to liberate trade, to free up trade, to reduce trade barriers around the world so that countries can trade with each other without any restriction. And that is that for Chapter 5, Grade 12s.